All right, and we are live. Hello, everyone.
Hey, everybody.
So, thank you for joining our author event. I'm Dave Lucy from page 156, Wake Forest, North Carolina. We hope someday we can invite you all to our store once we get back to some semblance of normalcy. But in the meantime, we're really excited to have Tariq Shah here, as well as our special guest, Molly Delaney from his publisher, $2 Radio. And I wanted just a couple of quick housekeeping things. There's a chat panel on the right. Some of you have already figured it out. Just you can chat amongst yourselves. So, there you go. And there's a Q&A tab at the bottom where below the video feed you can pop questions in at any point during the presentation. And we'll leave 10 or 15 minutes at the end and we can run through those. So, but feel free to pop them in there at any point as they come to your mind. And let's see what else we got. That is it. All right. So for those of you that don't know, Tariq Shah is our author this evening. He wrote, he's been writing fiction and poetry. And he's been featured in a number of different publications. Whiteout Conditions is his debut novel, and it was published last month by $2 Radio. Awesome timing. But who knew? Whiteout Conditions is available to purchase using the buy the book button there at the bottom of the video. So please click it, buy the book. And we've got Molly here from $2 Radio, who's one of our favorite small presses, and we've asked her to kind of be here and give us a little description of $2 Radio while everybody's here. So, cool. Molly.
Yeah. Well, thanks, Dave. Thank you for putting this together and having me on. So for those of you that aren't familiar with $2 Radio, we are an indie press based in Columbus, Ohio. We have been publishing books for 15 years now. We were started by a husband and wife team, Eric and Eliza Obanoff, and they started $2 Radio with a mission to reaffirm the artistic spirit of the publishing industry. And so what we do is we publish 5 or 6 books a year, all books that we think are really bold voices, are really challenging some of the other works that are out there. And yeah, we started off mostly doing fiction, but we've expanded to essay collections, story collections. Yeah, that's about it. We have a film division too that we started in 2013. So we like to keep pushing ourselves.
That's awesome. And you've got a number of different books coming out this coming year. Do you want to just briefly touch on any of them?
Yeah. So Tariq's book came out last month, perfect timing. So next month we have a story collection by Dima Al-Zayat. It's called Alligator and Other Stories. It's phenomenal, absolutely floored me. One of the best story collections that I've read in a very long time. So we're excited for that to come out. And then in July, we have a memoir by Billy Ray Belcourt. He is a pretty well-known poet based out of Canada, but his memoir is called A History of My Brief Body, and it deals with themes of like colonialism, talks about his identity as a queer Indigenous writer, and that also I think is, I don't know, we didn't know what was going on at this time, but a lot of his writing is about reimagining a better world, which I think is very relevant to this time right now, where we're starting to think about what we want this world to look like after all this.
Excellent. Yeah, that's great. All right. Well, thank you, Molly, for coming on, and we will. You bet. And I'm gonna shut off your video.
Cool.
So you're out of here. See ya. All right. So Tariq's gonna do a little reading, and then we're gonna chat for a little bit, and then we can get to your questions in the Q&A panel. So pop them in there, and without further ado, I'm going to put the focus on you.
Thanks, Dave. With the last of my loved ones now long dead, I find funerals kind of fun. Difficult to pinpoint what it is. I'm drawn to them. Call it an article of faith. They aren't what they used to be. And I am not my old self. I'm thinking of the deep boom and hush after the pastor shuts his thick tome of hymns, and the heavy groans of the pews when everyone kneels. What comes to mind are the high school boneheads loafing around the holy water stoop, too rad to grieve, or who never learned how, never learned that it is learned, like formal dinner etiquette or gallantry in the face of certain peril. It's the secret stoner altar boy glad to swing his censer, the blown apart family uniting for a minute to ridicule the reverend's lopsided toupee, the great uncle with trouble reading in the filmy pulpit daylight, his index finger trembling. Or when I drift off during an old man's eulogy, only to get clocked in the forehead with the truth bolt changing my vision of retired Honda dealers forever. At a certain point, the mileage accrued by hearts, like any muscle car, is just too fantastic. Once it was the apoplectic rage of a niece pacing the narthex, denied the chance to damn her uncle to hell, tell him she loved him. Sometimes it's the waterworks. Other times, the hearse. It was the pious haste with which Muslim grievers dug the grave, buried the doctor, how that left everyone in a swarm, a bit head-spun, and forgetful the dead's dead. The wholehearted embraces given me by evangelists to whom I didn't speak at all, the fervent strangers touched I'm there, who cared I'd come, each hug verging on a submission hold. And it's the bright secret that won't quit tap dancing behind my benign expression that I keep from them that ensures their enthusiasm and sincerity are squandered on me. Or a jogger. Sometimes there will be a jogger who will gawk like a rubbernecker, or just keep jogging, maybe go a little faster. Seeing my buddies in suits for the first time. The grandmother past remembering why she's there. Sometimes it's as simple as a song of tribute sung by someone who can't sing at all. You see people for who they are, and they don't mind being seen, and it's lovely in a way. That unabashed flawedness in the face of such heavy exposure, perhaps never to happen again. All of which would likely be overlooked were I choked up by the stiff in the coffin. It's everyone wondering why I'm there. It's all the suspicious looks. Why aren't you sad like us? Well, they all ping right off me. Shadowing death. Handling death like a snake charmer, fishing cobras from his wicker basket, wholly impervious to fang and by now safely immune to its venom, and how sometimes it's the other way around. Funerals are kind of fun. Yes, I've cultivated a taste. It's become a kind of social pursuit. It was a kink of a kind. But now Ray. I see his face, the one in the photograph, the reporter in the field held up to the camera with its fresh acne and his right cheek's dimple deeper than I remember, and him already taller than his mother. I'm having trouble sustaining a positive mental attitude. Now, a python's double-jointed jaws, death opens wide. But what do I know about such creatures? I considered putting all of this to big old Hank, who, after sucking down his third screwdriver beside me on the plane, gets talkative, wonders why I'm flying, what with the weather. Chicago had a heavy white Christmas chased by a short thaw, but the Channel 9 weather guy predicts a monster on the horizon. I say funeral as though it were a destination wedding. He's a day trader on the futures market. Manicured nails, plump baby face, silver cufflinks, He would think I'm horsing around, some sort of wise guy, and eventually expect a rational explanation, request a change of seats. But I'm coming clean. You ever play with matches as a kid? I ask. He clears his throat and nods, uncertain, as a pocket of choppy weather jostles the cabin, making Hank spill half his drink all over his nifty polka dot tie. After glancing down the aisle, he sucks the alcohol directly from the raw blue silk. I pretend not to notice. Outside the window, Illinois' patchwork of snow-dusted farmland scrolls underneath us, the color of month-old bread. The freeways and interstates carving colossal esoteric runes into it. The tiny black trees that suture it all together. Vince and I say, we used to slick our arms in Aquanet and light ourselves on fire. Our new rippling blue sleeves blowing our minds. Funerals are like that now. Only everyone else is burning for real, and I'm completely fine. I down the dregs of my coffee. You ever do that? Hank buckles his safety belt, says he can't stand landings, so I drop it. All this turbulence is getting to me too. Thanks, you guys.
Whew. Man, good stuff. Good stuff.
Thank you very much.
This is Whiteout Conditions. Here. Yeah, it's a great book. Really, I've read it twice now. And
oh wow.
Originally, when I met Molly at Winter Institute, was back when we had book conferences, which hopefully we'll be able to have again someday. She had given me a copy of it at that point, and yeah, it was. I immediately jumped on it, read it that night, and then again, you know, when we knew we were going to be working with you here, we jumped on it again, and it's a beautiful book. You can tell you're a poet. It's very lyrical. So I wanted to talk about a couple of things, though, in particular. One, the main characters being Ant, Vince, and Ray, but you know, Ray doesn't, you know.
Yeah, he's kind of around.
Right. But the other main character is the Cold. And man, I'm from North Carolina, and I was reading this, and there's a couple of points I put on a sweater because just you feel it. You feel the cold. They're on the side of the road pushing, and I've actually had that experience being in the middle of a snowstorm in Boston, and having to push a car, and that is not fun. You captured it perfectly, and it comes right back to you. I was wondering though, can you talk about the role of the location? You're from Chicago or that area, and
yeah, totally. I'm from Chicago. I'm from Lamont, Illinois originally. But it's basically like 45 minutes southwest of Chicago, so it's like in the Chicagoland area.
Okay.
And so I was writing about home and what the main characteristics of it. I was kind of thinking of myself as an American writer for the first time, and with that, I felt a sense of lineage to where I came from, and thought it would be important to write about it. And like when you think of Chicago or that area, like it's always in the winter. The winters are just brutal and everything. So I was trying to just find strategies and ways of talking about it that were very evocative, and that would elicit as much of a visceral response in the reader as possible, and then just kind of worked on sentences,
Yeah. Well, yeah, it definitely worked. So Aunt lives in New York, has to come home for this funeral.
Yeah.
And hasn't been home for a few years, 5 years or something like that, right? And
Right.
so it's one of those moments of homecoming. That's you're going to see people you haven't seen in a while who haven't left.
Right.
There's that awesome awkwardness and maybe a little bit of resentment in the relationship between him and Vince that kind of just rears up every once in a while.
Yeah. I think, that almost defines their relationship. Their sort of antagonism, and their history is long, and they're thrown into this car and this really gnarly road trip up to Big Bend, Wisconsin, and so they really have nothing else to do except kind of look at each other and talk about these things, and so that is kind of part of what generates the story and gives it, I think, its engine in a way.
Yeah, there's a toxic masculinity thing going on with you can kind of see it in there when they're talking about their younger years, but Vince is still very much in there. It feels like Ant kind of pulled himself out of that a bit, but
yeah, I think I think Ant saw some sort of a dead end in that lifestyle and wanted something more for himself. And Vince is an interesting character. He, I think, is sort of, when I was writing about him, I was thinking of sort of like an impotent modern guy, who has no outlet for anything anymore and has become this kind of really destructive, kind of eaten from the inside out, hollow person. And that gets him into a lot of trouble. And so, yeah, I think that's a pretty big theme in the book.
Yeah, that's a really interesting way to look at him, as kind of eaten from the inside out. Because he has relationships. He has a wife, and
yeah,
there's it's not like he's stuck as he was 5 years ago. But a lot of that, you can see those things coming through that haven't allowed him to move on or do anything productive, really.
Yeah, I think he there's a lot of conflict in him. He's trying to be a good dad, and he's trying to do all these things, but he's also he feels like he has to do something in this situation, right? And so part of his story is the choices he made and how to resolve this situation in his life.
It seems with Ant's not love, but his like of funerals, strong like. It seems like, and I'm wondering if maybe there's a common thing that they both feel like they're totally there are so many things that are completely out of their control. Ant's is that everybody around him is dead, and that the liking of a funeral gives him some control over that situation, that it's something he can count on. And then with Vince, it's like he can't control anything. So this seminal moment with his cousin's death gives him that thing to I'm going to do this. I'm going to control this situation. It's not going to control me.
Yeah. That's a good way of putting it.
Sorry, that's not really a question. It's just an observation.
Sure. No, it's cool. Ant is a character who has experienced a lot of loss, and he feels sort of like he's the only one left of his family, and he has nothing left to really feel sad about, even though he's kind of filled with grief, and so he goes to these funerals for a lot of reasons, but I think one of the big ones is that it sort of gives him a sense of control. It's almost as if he is out of the game of humanity anymore, and he can just do these things and observe these tragic events through a sort of callous eye, perspective that he gets joy out of. And then he's also, he is not distracted by the grief, and also sees, cultural intricacies and quirks that he also finds value in. But yeah, he's in a weird place, and I think he's a little bit sort of like perhaps where Vince was, 5 years before the events of this. Right. It's kind of on a similar trajectory, and I think a lot of the book is kind of him making this decision about how he's going to sort of handle these things that happen in the book.
And it's right around page 56, and I couldn't find it exactly, but it's right around there. And he's talking about this, and he says, "I'm just a weird remainder."
Yeah.
And I thought that was a great line. And how come he doesn't view himself as a survivor?
Well, I think he does a little bit. I think he almost feels like, maybe he is meant perhaps to be the one to mope around the face of the earth and suffer, and just kind of be out there. And so I think he is a survivor, but he sees that survival maybe as a punishment for something. Okay. You know what I mean?
Sure.
Like, I think you can gain a lot of strength from overcoming grief, but what makes him unique is that he gets that in this weird way, and I think it's ultimately like a kind of like armor that he's donned to cope with what's going on in his life.
Yeah, absolutely. There was another line that I really loved, where there's a really fog, the fog scene where he has to drive through the fog and he gets to the motel, and he says to the guy behind the desk at the hotel that was some fog, wasn't it? And the guy says, "I think it's still there. You just can't see it."
Yeah.
I love that. The imagery of that's really good.
Thank you very much. I really appreciate you were liking that line and all of this. In a way, I think that there's a kind of parallelism going on between the weather events and the physical events that happen in these characters' lives, and that's not like meant to mean so much. It's just kind of a way. It just kind of happened that way,
right?
And so yeah. Go ahead.
So can we talk a little bit about what was the catalyst for the book? Was there a catalyst for the book? I mean, how did this start? Because I asked because you're a poet, and now this is your debut novel. So where did that come from? And
it was interesting. So this started out as my my fiction thesis for my MFA, and so this was about it was the winter of 2017 when I wrote the first draft, and I was writing about something completely different. That entire year I was planning on writing a book length thing that was kind of centered on my time in the Peace Corps, and it wasn't really working, and I was getting desperate, and so winter break rolled around, and I was visiting family out in Seattle, and this was also the year that my mom had sold our house in Illinois and moved out west, to be with her grandkids and everything, and that was great. But so I was feeling my own kind of sense of displacement, and so ultimately I ditched that Peace Corps centered work because I was just like leafing through my notebook, and it came upon what ended up being the first line in the book, and that always intrigued me. I always thought it would just be like a short story or something, but at that time also, like my older brother had adopted a dog for the family, and I was just watching, my niece play with this big dog, big black lab, who's like super docile and the nicest dog ever, and like puts up with so much, but my niece was only like 6 or so at the time, and kind of like pulling on whiskers or whatever, and just playing around. So I'm just like sitting there watching that. I'm like, so much about fiction is like, what if, and so I kind of combined that scrap from my notebook with this other scenario, and tried to marry them. And that's kind of what generated it all, I think.
Interesting. That's very cool.
Yeah, it was wild.
How did you connect with $2 Radio?
I've been a fan of $2 Radio for a long time. I remember reading The Orange Eats Creeps by Grace Kralanovich when it came out. Like, I just saw it on like a list, like a best of the year list. I picked it up and it blew my mind. And I subsequently read a couple other books of theirs, like Joshua Moore's books. So they'd always been a press that I really respected, and having written this, I thought that there might be like a good fit there. And so they have an open submission period, so I sent it in, and then like a year later, I heard from Eric, and he was like, "Yeah, this is cool," and so we started just working on it. Nice,
that's excellent. What was that time frame like? 2017, you started writing it, and
yeah, so like December of 2017 is when I started it, and the first draft was done like mid-February of 2018. And then I graduated in May. I sent it out to, after like kind of revising it a little bit more, I sent it out to $2 Radio in August of 2018. August of 2019, I heard back from them, and we set a date for a March publication date. And so we kind of just like hit the road, like we worked pretty hard and pretty fast to get publishing shape since then.
Well, I think that's a definite advantage of working with a small press like that, because they're very nimble, and they can they find something they like and they're in. That's it. We're moving forward on it. So I really like that. I like them a lot. Obviously they do good work.
Yeah, totally. Yeah, they're great.
What's your writing process been like? And I assume you're continuing to write, obviously. So does it start with poetry for you kind of all the time, or?
No, it's really weird. I don't have a set process, it can sometimes, stories will turn into poems. Sometimes poems will turn into stories, depending on just like what the subject matter is and all of that. But it usually starts really small. It could be just a phrase written on a Post-it note, or something that like a note in my my notes app, and it develops from there. I usually write first drafts by hand, and then once it's kind of first draft is done, I'll type it out, and then there's a whole nother process of just revising and figuring out what it's really about, and things like that.
Cool.
But other than that, like, I think like depending on the process has to fit the project every time, and so it kind of is an organic, like ad hoc, whatever it needs in the moment, then that's what I'll do, kind of a thing.
Cool.
If that makes sense.
Yeah, it does. We talked to a lot of different authors, and it's a question that we like to ask, because the process is so different for everyone. It seems like, some people are very rigid, and I have to storyboard everything and Post-its, and it takes over it's consuming every aspect of their life for that period of time while they're working on the book. And it's interesting to hear how the creative process is and how it's so different for each author. Do you have early readers that you go to?
I have MFA friends and family and other friends who I am usually bouncing work off of them, exchanging work all the time. And that's the extent of it. Like, I was going to say something about the process again, but I forgot it. Yeah, I have a few readers,
Good. And do you hate editing as much as it seems like everybody does?
I love editing.
Do you?
I actually do. I love, and I think that because it's kind of born from poetry. I love tinkering with lines, and developing them. For my regular work, I teach adjunct English here in Brooklyn, and also work at the writing center, kind of doing writing consultancy stuff too. So it's kind of natural. I like, the nuts and bolts of it, and kind of playing around and seeing how to maximize the effectiveness of sentences and stuff like that.
Cool. So do you see any in the teaching? Are you, do you sort of mentor any young authors or anything like that, or is it
most of the students I work with are freshmen,
Okay.
or they're graduate students in a different program entirely of the school. That said, like, my students are always consistently surprising me and challenging me, and it's really great. But yeah, they're mostly undergrad, or freshmen, still young, and so I'm just kind of usually giving them general advice about writing, and exposing them to all different kinds of voices, and not pushing them too much.
Right. Do you think you want to do another reading? A little bit?
Sure.
You mind?
Sure.
All right.
Yeah.
So while he's getting ready to do that, I just want to throw out there that if you have questions, we're going to get into that pretty soon. So pop them in that little ask a question thing at the bottom. And let me give you the focus. There you go.
I'm back home, braving O'Hare's crowds. The holidays are through, but Concourse K is still a nightmarish glut of holly jolly backwash, slowpoke vacationers and duty-free shopaholics, Bing Crosby, and on-sale candy cane pyramid displays that all hound me faster for the exits. It's been a few years since I last saw Vince, who was on his way to get me out of here. We are off to Big Bend to bury what's left of his little cousin, Ray. I heard about it on the morning news. I caught the tail end of the broadcast. The young face on the screen seemed an organic extension of something startling in its familiarity to me. The sensational nature of the incident pushed the story into wider media markets, I think, all the way to the East Coast. So I gave Vince a call. I said I would come out, give a show of support. Though I could have done less, I said it was the least I could do. Vince and his family sort of took me in after my own family's disintegration. The last time I saw Ray, I think, he was 8 and I had just finished school. It was Vince's birthday, middle autumn sometime. We cooked out. I remember Vince giving Ray his first taste of liquor, a swig from his solo cup of Captain Morgan and whatever, and then spending the afternoon with them, shooting hoops in the drive. A few old folks in lawn chairs giving color commentary. I remember watching Ray take that sip and Vince asking him, "How you like the taste of that?" Ray makes this sour face and said, "Beer's better." All the old folks ate that right up. Slicking out past the baggage carousels, I have a post-flight cigarette that hits me so hard I swoon and gag like a rookie. But the parking garage fumes are a pleasant surprise. There's something I find nostalgic in the odor. All maple syrup and gasoline in the exhaust of a couple hundred idling taxi cabs. It's been around 5 years since I've been back, and yet the puddles of slush by the wall where smokers shelter from the cruel gusts seem pitiless as ever. black and bottomless, an inky soup. I've missed even them. Here, the sky yawns white all day, then rips your head off like afterburners once the sun falls off the horizon. But when the cold comes, it comes like a dream, lugging the dark in a big black sack, and my body readjusts to the old song it knows by heart. Planes arrive and depart. I know Vince is circling around here somewhere, eyes peeled for someone I barely resemble now. I forget the kind of car he drives. It's one of those big, dependable American makes, 4 doors, and the type of interior that's not the leather option. The sort of car they don't really make anymore, built with a once fine quality and craftsmanship that has long since fallen out of practice. One of those made-up names that seem real. But who knows what state it's in? I smear out the smoke and wait on the outer traffic island for some kind of sign of him. Thanks, you guys.
Awesome. Good stuff, man.
Thank you.
Good stuff. So there's a couple of people that have popped into the chat that apparently know you from various places.
Uh-oh.
Yeah. Adon, barista of Earth. He knows you.
Oh, great.
Who else was there? Cynthia from Florida. And then a friend of mine that is actually a local in Wake Forest here, Jean. She grew up in Oak Lawn and lived in and Oak Forest, which is not far from Lamont. And she moved to North Carolina in 2011 to escape the winter. So
I don't blame her. Yeah.
Yeah, it's pretty nice here. It's like in the 70s today. So
You know, my little sister used to live in Asheville.
Oh, cool.
So, yeah. I love. I've also been to Charlotte in the past. North Carolina is great.
So it's a wide state. So there's a lot of a lot going on with the beaches, and then we have the mountains. So it's cool because we live kind of in the eastern to the middle. But in 2 hours we could be at the beach, and like 4 hours we could be in the mountains and go skiing in the wintertime if you want.
Yeah.
So you kind of can still get at those things, but you don't have to experience what Ant is experiencing at O'Hare, which we've all done, and it's awful.
Yeah, it's the worst. Oh, that's
all right,
cool.
So a couple of questions here from the audience here. So Christina the Bookbinder would like to know if Ant is based on someone you know.
No. I think all of these characters are kind of bits and pieces of me and the people I know, my brothers. But there's no direct correlation to any single person. It's fiction. But you use real life as sort of like a runway sometimes, to get where you're going.
Mm-hmm.
But no, it's fiction.
Makes total sense, and I don't think you should admit it, even if it isn't. So, no.
Yeah.
So, why'd you choose the name Ant? That's another question from Varsha.
Yeah, that's a good question. All of the names, pretty much. I chose kind of for their versatility, and so you have Vincent, who could also be Vince or Vin or Vinny. And so I thought that would be useful just in terms of the music of the sentence, right?
Sure.
And just the way that it might be sound if or when it's ever spoken out loud. So that gave me some leeway. And Ant, I don't know. The Ant is sort of kind of like an ant. He's kind of a small, tough, worker, and so it's also one syllable. And so that was, helpful too. And so I like, certain names when they're coupled together just have a ring to me. And so Vince and Ant and Vince, they just kind of went together But other than that, I didn't think about it that much, you know.
Honestly, that's a really fascinating. That's much more of a thoughtful answer than I thought you might have. Only because and naming when you're naming characters in novels, I see that's got to be a kind of one of those things where you do it and you just roll with it and go. But you're thinking of this in the context. You're thinking of it like a poet. So you're thinking of how those words sound together and how they're spoken and how the different syllable counts work. I mean, it's good.
Yeah. Thanks, man. I really appreciate that.
Isabel wants to know, do you feel any sort of responsibility in dealing with toxic masculinity as a part of a social problem? And also, do you think there's been a shift towards more ethical or politically involved picture of masculinity among contemporary and mostly male authors in the context of Trump's election and Me Too?
Yeah, I think that's a great question. I think I think all art is kind of political, and so I felt a certain responsibility to kind of be like, I guess, like, take care of my own house first, being a heterosexual male and kind of being around situations and people like this. I felt like my own responsibility to not ignore it. I mean, I didn't set out to write a book about toxic masculinity or anything like that. I'm concerned about the characters and the story and what happens, but I didn't want to really make excuses for these characters or anything like that. So so there's a little bit, like, I did feel a small responsibility, a personal responsibility to try and I guess I don't want to say comment on it, but portray it as it is.
Right. Excellent. Brian wants to know, does your talent as a drummer help you as a poet?
Man.
Yes, you have to, right?
Totally. That's weird. Yeah, like there's a connection between music and writing
Sure.
in a big way. It kind of has to do with timing and stuff like that. It certainly helps me when I'm reading out loud. I think you kind of have a sense of pace and stuff. When I'm actually writing stuff or revising stuff, drumming is really far from my mind. It's kind of a different. I'm in a different gear.
I would think it has a good synchronicity there between the two.
Yeah.
All right, so that's all the questions we have. Oh wait, one more. Oh yeah, so Jeannie wants to know, my friend here from Wake Forest, Jean, she said, did I hear you mention Big Bend, Wisconsin? And if so, why did you choose that town? If not, I must be missing Southeast Wisconsin. No, you did. It is Big Bend, right?
Yeah, it's Big Bend.
Yeah.
I like the name of it. I personally have relatives that are all around the Chicagoland area. Like in the north and south and everything, and I have been up to like northern Illinois and the Wisconsin border a bunch of times in the past, but I mean there wasn't much more to it than it was just a cool name, and that was like in the general vicinity of where I was familiar, and so I wanted to be careful to not make this be about like a specific place and like pick on a place like that, so so it just sounded cool. That's kind of long and short of it.
So one other comment, let me just see what that is. Ari says that he was curious to hear more about the moment when Ant goes upstairs with Evelyn and Marcy, and it felt like you'd finally get a sort of a nurturing break. And then he says arguably the exact wrong thing, which also predicts the conclusion.
Oh, yeah. I don't know how much I should say about that.
Yeah.
But maybe, a year down the road or something when it's kind of like been read a lot and
Yep.
So
Ari, come back in a year. No, it's all good. We'll do this again in a year, and we'll all regroup and
yeah, or send me
we
a
can have
message.
a spoiler event and just talk with people that have everybody's read it, and we can say don't come unless you've read the book. So
Yeah,
I'll do that. I'll totally do that. It's like a book club.
that'd be awesome for sure.
We could do it. Yeah, and definitely read the book for sure. If there are any other questions, yeah, we could definitely do it. People like that idea of doing the book club, so we'll do that.
That'd be great.
Yeah. I just wanted to say one more thing really quick, and that is that having a book published during a pandemic is probably one of the it's just unprecedented, right? I mean, none of us have experienced anything like this.
Yeah.
And obviously it as a bookseller, it's hard to see books that are fantastic and you want to get into so many people's hands, and there's just they're not coming into the store. So we're doing different things in our store. We have a concept of a grab bag where people order and they just say, I like these kinds of books, here's some money, give me books. And we try to focus a lot of the books in those from small presses, because we know that they're inordinately hurt by this, as well as authors like you. So I just want to put a plug in, no matter where you buy it, even if you don't buy it from me, buy the book, buy $2 Radios books, and keep them, make sure that they can keep going and keep doing this thing. And I'm sure that is whiskey in his mug. I would hope it is. Is it whiskey in your mug?
Yeah.
Yeah, good. What kind of whiskey? Anything good?
No, it's just like what is it, Canadian Club?
There you go.
Yeah.
That's all right. Well, thank you guys.
Thank you so much, Dave. I think what you're doing is great. The grab bag idea sounds really cool. And yeah, it's weird to have this happen a little bit, right when the book launched, but it could be a lot worse,
Oh, yeah.
So still thankful for the opportunities to do things like this and reach out and talk to the people. One day it'll happen in person, everybody.
There you go. We'd love to welcome you to the store at some point too, if you ever get down this way.
I would love it. That'd be great.
Thank you all for coming. We really appreciate your support and being here. And we will catch you on the next one. Yeah, Store Rager. There you go.
Thanks, everybody.
Thank you.
All right.